This country, Dr. Mordechai Kedar, affectionately known as Moti. So Moti, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Tom. Usually I'm getting embarrassed with such introductions because the expectations of people become too high. And it's not easy for me to meet these expectations, yet I try. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to wake up, both in America and here in Israel. We have to see the reality and to think about the reality in realistic eyes. Otherwise, we are falling asleep on guard or at the wheel. And you know what happens to a car where the driver is falling asleep on the wheel? I love classical music, not this kind of music, but my heroes of music are Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Haydn and Mozart. And as a soldier, I could go to concerts for free because the Philharmonic Orchestra here in Tel Aviv allows soldiers in uniform to come for free to the concerts on base of a free seat. One day they played a Midsummer Night Dream by Felix Mendelssohn. And this piece has a women's choir in it. And the Philharmonic Choir sent its ladies to sing this piece. And I saw a cute girl in the choir. So I joined the choir. And we named the first child, the first daughter, we named her Shiri, which in Hebrew means my song. But those days, of course, we got married beforehand. And we are married already for 48 years in August. We have 5 of our own children. And the grandchild number 20 was born this. So, bli ayin hara. And apparently there will be more. Although we don't say anything, but the kids apparently know what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the other aspect of my life. The real one is what Tom talked about. The intelligence, which was based on the fact that I studied Arabic in the high school. My mother tongue is Yiddish, because my parents came from Poland in the 30s before the war, and they spoke at home in Yiddish, but we fell in love with the Arabic teacher, a man who originally came from Germany, and he spoke fluent Arabic. He was a spy, by the way, in Egypt against the Germans. And apparently the victory of the British on the Rommel division in North Africa was thanks to the information which he brought as a spy for the British in Egypt. He was sent from here because he knew both Arabic and German, because he was originally from Germany. So he was inviting the officers of Rommel to the pubs of Alexandria, was drenching them, not with water, and they were singing, saying all the secrets. And he was going back home to send the British what he heard from the officers, and they waited to Rommel in the right place, in the right time, and defeated him. Otherwise, the whole place would be occupied by the Germans, and the Germans had a plan to exterminate the Jews of this country in those years, not far from here, in Emek Dotan. Already they had a plan to build crematoria here in this land to continue what they started there. So apparently thanks to this man, my Arabic teacher later, he actually saved the place. And just imagine, the Germans had the plan to occupy the Gulf actually as well. Means the sources of oil. How could Britain fight without oil? How could the United States fight without oil? And this was their satanic plan, the Germans, the Nazis, to occupy the Gulf and to take over all the oil sources, so the West, means America, Britain, will not be able to fight. Just imagine if they succeeded. So maybe this man, my Arabic teacher, Dov Iron, may he rest in peace, maybe he saved the civilization by helping the British to defeat the Germans with the information which he brought from the officers of Rommel, to that degree. And this is how important intelligence is. You know, in order to win a war, you need three things. Intelligence, and
intelligence.
How did you know?
Good guess.
Okay, good guess. Okay, when you have good intelligence, you can win. Otherwise, how do you say, forget it. And that's what I tried to do for 25 years in 8200. And yet, we had cooperations, in plural, with all kinds of organizations, parallel organizations, NSA included. And we were working with them shoulder to shoulder. Projects which were highly, super important for both Israel and the United States of America. And not only, NATO included. So I won't elaborate what and when and how, but it's enough for us to know that there is a good cooperation, because we have the same enemies, we have the same challenges facing those enemies. And actually, the topic which I was invited to speak about is actually this: the dangers which come without us noticing what is happening. A state, every state in the world, is defined first and before everything else is defined by the borders. You know, the map. Without a map, without borders, there is no state. This is the content. Okay? So the borders actually define the state geographically. And this is the first definition of a state. A territory with a government. But for this you need a territory. You have to know where it starts, where it ends. Otherwise there is no territory, otherwise there is no state. And a state which does not have steady, secure borders is not a state. And we have a very good example of what happens to a state which does not, or which is not able to keep its borders. I wrote my PhD on Syria. I love this country because this was one of my topics. And after I got released from the army in 1995, I dedicated 3 years in order to write my PhD on Syria. I know very much about Syria. Today I know nothing. Why? Because Syria did not keep its borders shut. And therefore, the jihadists of Daesh, of ISIS, could infiltrate into Syria, and the whole system, which I knew very much about, deteriorated, collapsed, and vanished. And the situation of Syria today actually started when the Syrian regime failed in keeping its borders from those jihadis who came from Iraq, came from Turkey, and Turkey, don't forget, is a member of NATO. Turkey is a member of NATO. Yet, Turkey was the gate for all the jihadis who came from Tunisia, from Morocco, even from here, from Egypt, from wherever they came to Turkey, and they walked to Syria. Why? Because the Syrian regime, because of various reasons, could not keep its borders shut. And this is actually what brought Syria to the situation today that there is no Syria. How do I know? Israel doesn't relate to Syria anymore as a threat. what we have in Syria, instead of a state, we have militias run by Iran. They are the threat. But Syria as a state, Syria as a regime, Syria as an army is actually non-existent. And this deterioration of Syria started with the borders, which the regime could not keep from those jihadists. We had the same thing in Israel for a while. We had the long border, which was only a marcation on the ground between Rafah, means near Gaza, and Eilat. This was like 200 kilometers of a border, which everybody could walk in and out. We had smugglers, especially Bedouins from Sinai, who had brethren inside Israel, because the Bedouins are wandering from place to place, so they have relatives everywhere. So they were smuggling women, they were smuggling goods, weapons, ammunition, babies, everything which people are interested. So they were smuggling in and out between Israel and Egypt. The important was, or the dangerous was the weapons, because they were smuggling weapons to the Palestinians and to other people, of course criminals. And when there is demand, there are people who would supply it. Okay? And there was a demand, unfortunately, and there was... The worst was when battalions, many people, who came from Africa, came to Israel through the Egyptian border. I'm talking about Sudan, I'm talking about Eritrea, and other countries of Africa, because those countries in Africa are deteriorating countries, failed countries. So they went to Sudan, from there they went to Egypt, and from Egypt, since the Mediterranean Sea, people can sink if you don't have a good ship, so they came by walking through the Sinai Desert to Israel. Unfortunately, many of them were dying on the way. Others were caught by the Bedouins in Sinai, were brought to a place, to a clinic in Sharm el-Sheikh, and would be butchered in order to take out kidneys, livers, and all kinds of things as spare parts for people. To that degree, these poor people were victims even of those organ traffickers who used them in order to harvest their organs, to that degree. Not to mention what happened to women on the way by the Bedouins who took advantage of their being women. And they came here, poor people, and we, as merciful people, we gave them shelter. Why did we give them shelter? In Tel Aviv. Because they wanted to work, and there's so much work in the south, so we brought them to Tel Aviv, and they settled in southern Tel Aviv. And more people came, and they got to Tel Aviv. Most of them are, by the way, Muslims from Sudan, from Eritrea. And all of a sudden, we find out that Tel Aviv became, or southern Tel Aviv became, little Sudan, or little Eritrea. Different culture. And lo and behold, they take advantage of the Israeli social security. They don't like to work so much. Lo and behold, they came to work, but they don't. Thank goodness there is a government which gives them money. Health system, why pay? They get everything for free. They don't have what to pay. And of course they harass the ladies who live in that place, the Israeli ladies, and they will behave. There's nothing which we meant. When we gave these people shelter, it was, to save their lives. But we didn't mean to build a whole colony which will be devastating for our people in southern Tel Aviv. This was not what we meant. And then we understood that it cannot be like this. And we shut the border with a fence. Means we actually made the border a border. Because without a border, as you know, there is no state. Now, these people who come from the open borders, as it was before, They don't care about the state. They care only about themselves. They don't serve the state. And they get all the services, including medical services and education for the kids. But they don't pay taxes because they are not registered on the tax system. So here is a great discrimination. An Israeli guy works from sunrise to sunset, sweats, in order to bring some food home, pays dues, pays taxes, and gets some services, and so it's okay. And these people do nothing, and they get everything. This is a discrimination against Israelis. And this actually was tearing the Israeli society. Because it became a social problem, a society problem. And today we have a Knesset member, a lady, great lady, Mai Golan, who actually was a fighter in southern Tel Aviv. She was born there, she was living there, fighting against this infiltration of a different culture, people who have totally different agenda, in order to occupy Tel Aviv. And lo and behold, these people actually tell us after a while that we, means they, will kick us out from this country because this country was Islamic country and they are all Muslims, and it should return to Islam because Palestine is an Islamic country, and we are here only temporarily, and there will be the bastion which will kick us out. To that degree, we have to face these people. Okay? This was a mistake, and everybody here understood that this was a big mistake to accept them and to let them settle here in big numbers and to build their colony in order to kick us out from this land. Israel started to, first of all, to financially fight against the employers, because they found here their employers, taxation, so it became not profitable to use them. So they were unemployed, so many of them left, and the country helped them to live, and they left wherever they were, to Europe, to Africa, and whoever wanted to leave, Israel facilitated his way out. Yet Israel also had an agreement with at least one African country to accept them and to take them. And Israel will fly them to that place. However, people appealed to our Supreme Court against this, claiming all kinds of nonsense. So the Supreme Court stopped it. And by the way, I don't know if you know, this country is run by the Supreme Court. And now we have this big struggle here inside Israel, whether the Supreme Court should run the country or not. So the left wants the Supreme Court, which is totally, or almost totally leftist organization. They want to perpetuate this situation, while the right wing, which is the majority of the population, want to change it and to turn back the judicial revolution which started in the early 90s by the Supreme Judge Aaron Barak back to the situation which it was until then. And Israel was not a dictatorship before the 90s. It was never a dictatorship. Today it is a dictatorship of the Supreme Court, which was never elected, because there a friend bring his friend in. So this is actually, they stopped almost everything which the state wanted to do in order to return these people back to Africa. And we got stuck with a small number of them, because with the time they leave one by one, because Israel encouraged them to leave, of course, in peaceful ways. Ladies and gentlemen, this invasion of infiltrators was actually threatening to tear the society apart. And this is what might happen to countries which do not keep their borders shut. Because many people come and they expect all kinds of services, they expect all kinds of benefits, as I say in the British vocabulary, while they never served in the army, they never served the country, they never pay taxes. Why should those who spend years in the army, like the singer, or myself, or my sons, or everybody here who serves in the army, and pays taxes, and we have 45% residual tax here in this country. 45%, imagine, okay? And we pay everything. And prices here are exorbitant, and we don't get the services which those invaders who pay nothing get. And this is actually what was threatening the society, because people were on one side is shouting, screaming against it, because they were feeling that they are discriminated against, while others whose human rights are their new religion decided that we should sacrifice ourselves and our economy on the altar of giving shelter to some Africans who do not like the situation in Africa. Okay, and this actually was the struggle here. However, Netanyahu's government decided to shut the border, and the border is shut. Usually. 2 weeks ago we had an accident that the Egyptian, other side of the fence, Egyptian soldier or policeman crossed the fence and killed 3 of our soldiers who were guarding the place. Okay, yes, we pay this price for living on our forefathers' land, which we returned to after 2,000 years of exile, thanks to, yes, the Christian world, which supported our return to our forefathers' land, and before everybody else, Lord Balfour, an evangelical British Minister of Foreign Affairs in 1917, who actually started the international process of recognizing internationally the rights of the Jews over this country. His declaration of 1917 was accepted by the League of Nations 3 years later, in April of 1920 in San Remo, and ever since then the right of the Jews to this country was accepted as a deal, as a done deal by the international community since 1920. And the United Nations, which emerged after the Second World War in 1945, actually embraced all the decisions of the League of Nations, including the San Remo decision, which gives the Jewish people this land. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do not keep our land, it will not be our land anymore. And keeping the land means, first of all, borders. And borders not only to keep the jihadis out of the borders, it's also to keep the society. That the society doesn't sink into all kinds of feuds and disputes about what to do with these people and what not to do with these people. And you know what? When I walk, unfortunately, in some places in your country, I really don't know what is happening there. I was in the West Coast a few months ago, in San Francisco. I remember San Francisco as a flourishing city like 20 years ago. You know, flower kids. It was happy. Happy place. People were optimistic. Yes, people were optimistic. People were, okay, we can think about what we like. Yet it was American, very American. Today, I don't know who of you lives in San Francisco. I went with her, I almost cried to see what's happening. You cannot walk in the street without stepping on needles, or bottles, or all kinds of other stuff. Condoms included. In the streets. Yep. Excuse me? Seattle was occupied. The center of Seattle was occupied 2 years ago. Yeah. For how long? 3 months? By a gang of of these. Okay? Some of them are invaders. Some of them are local. But I'm afraid that when a country loses its identity, when a country loses its agenda, When a country loses its lifestyle and sacrifices its being on the altar of invaders, whether people or ideas, this is the end of the country. And and this is actually the message. Here in Israel, we caught this genie in time and we put him back into the bottle. And little by little, we are getting rid of this invasion which threatened our society before the economy. I think that every country which wants to survive as a state should first of all make sure that the borders remain closed, and whoever only has a visa or a legal way how to come into that country should come in. Illegal way to go is one way out, not in. This is my humble idea, to my humble view, and I think that if we are not cautious enough, the fate of Syria should be a reminder for all of us. Well, there is a very important book written by a British guy named Douglas Murray. The title of the book is The Strange Death of Europe. I'm sure this book should be read by every American, because the Atlantic Ocean is not wide enough to keep America away as safe from what happens in Europe today. This is a must read for every American. For the Europeans, it's too late, unfortunately, because Douglas Murray actually documents what Europe is going through. America could be saved if America wakes up in order to make sure that what happens in Europe will not cross the Atlantic. But be very aware of it, because the Atlantic Ocean, as wide as it is, it's not wide enough to keep you away from what happens in Europe. Therefore, you have to stand in the gates in order to make sure that the fate of Europe does not come to your shores.
The behavior of this current administration in the United States is allowing our adversaries to weaponize migration against us. For example, if I were to try to dismantle or fracture the foundation of a nation, that could be a possible tool of war. But we're allowing it to happen. I mean, we've left it wide open. So, I mean, the anomaly for me is it's not just that...
The border, and it is a problem, is only one phenomenon within a wider picture. And you have to see the wider picture. Open border and allowing everyone to come in is part of a new age, or woke, as people say, of slaughtering all the holy cows or sacred cows which we ever believed in. Means changing dramatically the society. Open society of George Soros, and I'm embarrassed to say that this man is a Jew. The open society and his ideas are the umbrella under which ideas like open borders are growing. And there are many other ideas which are parallel to this idea, and they are no less dangerous than open borders. Especially the gender chaos which we see today. You know what? I was in New York, what was like last year, and my wife took me to Broadway to see a show. And before the show, we went to the bathroom, you know. And on the doors, there are signs. You know, it says men, women, and there are signs printed on a sheet of paper. Everyone can use any bathroom according to his decision.
Wow.
You're kidding me.
I can show the picture. I took picture of it. Means men, women could go wherever they like according to their feeling. If you are a man and you feel like a woman, go to the women. Okay, so I stand and look at this. I said, is this applicable also on swimming pool showers? You women know better than me. How much effort, how much agony was put into the ideas of women's rights, to be left alone, to be honored, without harassment, without men taking advantage of whatever they like. It was a long and painful struggle.
Absolutely, yes.
And finally, thank God, women achieved a degree of honor, that sexual harassments are not acceptable anywhere, and it's good so. Now comes these new signs. You go to a shower in your swimming pool, and you find around you men who feel like women. Where are the women's rights for privacy? For example, okay, this, we say in Hebrew, tirlul, I don't know how to say it in English, chaos. This chaos actually is threatening society no less than open borders. Because this is actually destroying the borders of gender, which is no less dangerous than demarcation of the borders of a state. Because this is actually affects each and every one of us. And this is under the same umbrella, the demarcation or the erasing of the borders between men and women are no less dangerous than the erasing the borders between states. And this is how it's a social issue, it's a social problem, and you cannot deal with the borders by itself. The problem is bigger, the problem is wider, the problem is much more complicated than opening the borders or not. It is a mindset of a people, mindset of a state, mindset of administration, mindset of a Congress, Senate, and everyone who has what to say about what happens in any country in the world. In Israel, it's more or less like in the States. There are normal media, and there are those who collaborate with all these woke issues, which are actually part of the problem. Fortunately, people do not consume TV as they did in the past. Today they use this. And I don't know if you know, there is a great news application which was produced by a company named Newsrael, which I have the honor to be the vice president of this company. And we produced a right-wingish, right, it's not the side. It's this, because the struggle is not between right and left. The struggle is between right and wrong. Yes. Okay? So we produce a right application for news. It's called Newsrael, exactly. We are surrounded by the Arab world, after all. We are located in the crater of the volcano here in the Middle East. And it's always nice to compare Israel's situation and the United States. Your neighbors are the Mexicans in the south, the Canadians in the north, the tuna fish in the east, and the barracudas in the west. Who are our neighbors? Hezbollah in the north, the Jihadis of Iran in the east, the Jihadis of Sinai Desert in the west. Okay, and this is what Israel were. This is the location of Israel. Okay, and as Mr. Hilton once said about his hotels, everything is about location, location, and location. So here, this is our location. And of course, And not only this, these countries are failing states. Lebanon is a failing state. Syria, as I mentioned, is a failing state. Iraq, thanks to help from the outside, is a failing state. And today it is a prey for the Iranians. Yemen is a failing state. So is Gaza. Okay? And all these parts of the Middle East are actually today controlled by the Iranians. And they discovered the best way how to fight Israel. Why having states? States, as you might know, states are limited by the international law, by the United Nations, by the Security Council. States are, you know, if you are not a superpower like Russia, you are limited. Because Russia has a veto in the Security Council, so they can do whatever they like. But other normal countries are bound in many cases because of the Security Council and the international agreements and all kinds of conventions and so forth. Okay? However, when you operate an organization like Hezbollah, like all these dozens of organizations in Syria and Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen, and the Jihad in Gaza, and the Hamas, they are not bound to anything because they are not states. They are organizations, defined as the organizations. So they can do whatever they like. They are not states. And this is the satanic plan of the Iranians, to employ and to use all these organizations against Israel. How can Israel retaliate? Against whom? Against the Syrian poor people who can do nothing against those militias? What can we retaliate against Lebanon? The state of Lebanon is no more than a latex glove on the hand of Hezbollah. Hezbollah operates it. So, whom should we punish if Hezbollah shoots missiles at us from civil places? Should we kill civilians? The New York Times will not like it. Will say that Israel murders Lebanese kids. Okay, this is what they do. And Hezbollah actually, you know what, I'll give you a little secret. Hezbollah, they have a stockpile of who knows how many thousands. Some people say 150,000 missiles against Israel. Where is the storage? If there is a storage, you can hit the storage. Okay? Where are these missiles stored? They go to, let's say, the development place, which is nothing. Let's say 200 dunams of place, like 100 acres. They dig the whole place, let's say 50 meters below the surface, and they build parking lots, 5-story parking lot under the ground. On the parking lot, on the level of the street, they build shops, clinics, supermarkets, you know, everything, you know, on this whole space, kindergartens, whatever, and above this, 3 floors of offices, workplaces, and above them, some skyscrapers of apartments. Real planned development. Parking lots,
Infrastructure.
5 floors of parking lot, a floor of restaurants and everything in the street level, 3 stories of offices, you know, lawyers, accountants, whatever they need, and skyscrapers of apartments. Okay? And they bring, you know, the world to see how nicely they build, you know, apartments and offices. Oh, very nice. However, after they take pictures with all the guests from the whole world, they take 2 or 3 levels of the parking lot to store missiles. Now, if you bomb this place, the whole thing will collapse. With the skyscrapers, with the apartments, with the offices, with the supermarket, with the kindergarten, with everything. Can Israel bomb such a place? Can any country bomb such a place to cause the deaths of who knows how many thousands of people in this compound which was built? But this compound includes who knows how many hundreds of missiles which will be launched from under the ground. They have the way how to launch them out. Okay? And this is what we have to face. What will the New York Times say if we actually act against such a storage? That Israel is killing masses of Lebanese, and they live there as human shields. This is the challenge. Now, what can you do with this? Now, they owe nothing to the international law. They are not bound by any international law because they are an organization. They are not a state. And this is what Iran actually turned the Middle East into failing states, which you cannot do anything against because they actually are dysfunctional. The state of Lebanon is dysfunctional. Yet, they are vicious, they are armed to their teeth, those with those missiles and other things, and they threaten a state like Israel, which is bound by the international law, Geneva Convention, all these things. And this is what we have to face. Now, how can you deal with this? Commander, of course, and the commander has two officers under him, the most important officers. One is the intelligence officer, who brings him the challenges, the situation behind the hill, what happens in the other side. And he brings him all the dangers and all the problems which the unit has to face. The other officer is what we call Ksin Agam, means the operation officer. And he brings to the table, or to the desk, or to the discussion, all the solutions. This challenge of the intelligence officer, we can do this. From this, we need something from the battalion to get. From this, we know what to do. For this, we do it this way. This way, we have to train somebody and we'll do this. Okay, he gives the solutions. I am the intelligence officer. I bring the challenges. There are others who are in charge of finding, developing, training the solutions. One of them is one of my sons. He served and he is in reserve in a unit named Shaldag. Shaldag is a kingfisher, but the unit is an infantry unit which is airborne. Infantry unit belongs to the Air Force, therefore, here in Israel, and they are designed to fight on remote targets. Nobody knows where and what. Okay? So apparently, we have people to carry out the solution. Let's hope that the solution is real, and those kids come home after they do whatever they have to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to wake up, both in America and here in Israel. We have to see the reality and to think about the reality in realistic eyes. Otherwise, we are falling asleep on guard or at the wheel. And you know what happens to a car where the driver is falling asleep on the wheel. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very, very much. Good job. Thank you.